Everyone, and welcome to the Beyond the X and O's podcast, where we discuss mindset and leadership within the world of sports. This podcast is hosted by myself, Dr. Cassie Preston. I'm a mental performance coach and founder of CEP Mindset, and Christy Piero, who has spent the past 30 plus years in the game of hockey from the NHL on down, including where he coached me back in my junior days. And now we get to work together in the mental performance and leadership space. Chris, another great episode. Really enjoyed our guests, someone I've got to know, a previous guest again, Trevor Large. Let you introduce him today's episode before we let the listeners dive in.
Yeah, you know what? It was great. Yeah, Trevor's another return guest, and certainly, I've have a long history with Trev. My first head coaching opportunity that I had, it was in junior hockey, and Trevor Large was a second-year player on that junior team that we had with the Brampton Capitals, and very good player, really, really good person. And I remember that from when he was a teenager. He parlayed his success in junior hockey to get a scholarship to Ferris State, played NCAA hockey for 4 years, and then got into coaching, and sort of, his journey of coaching and leadership. And it comes out in the episode, and I thought was really good, Cass, is that, his journey from being an assistant coach at the NCAA level, at really two different colleges. And then he went to Canisius, where he was an assistant coach there for a number of years before he took over as the head coach. And he's been the head coach at Canisius College for the last 6 years. And kind of his journey culminated really this past season. They made the NCAA tournament for the first time in school history. So it was a pretty good accomplishment for him, the program. But I just think the whole episode itself is kind of a insight into Trev. And, I know you've got to know him over the last couple of years and doing some work with him and his squad. I just think his importance and his insistence on kind of building a culture and building a culture of accountability and trust, and those things kind of come through very loud and clear, and and how he's articulated his journey in coaching, but specifically in leadership.
Yeah, and what I loved, and one of the reasons we got him back on, obviously having a big year, he's really embraced, doing things differently, and thinks about the game differently, thinks about mindset, culture. Like you said, it's definitely very, he's a good person at heart, and that comes through. And one of the big things, and one of the main reasons I wanted to come back on, and I knew, he's really started to embrace his own mindset as a coach and a leader. And one of the most foundational things when we think about mindset and the mindset first approach with the upcoming book is not getting obsessed with results. And as a coach, it's so easy to, let alone as an athlete or anybody, to get consumed with the external scoreboards. And I think he's really embraced that as a coach for his career. And he really talked about this past season, not checking the clock. He just stops checking. Not that he's not aware and doesn't check at all, but like he's no longer obsessed. And he's just instead immerse himself in the process of coaching and being their first players and supporting and encouraging and guiding them and leading them. And, obviously you have to dive in and listen to him and how he explains it, because it's, to me, a fairly radical approach, whereas most coaches, we're counting down the clock and we're coaching the score and the game and not actually coaching the players in the process, and reflecting on what is my role as a coach. So there's lots of great stuff in there. We talk about him using the alter ego and his best self, the importance of being calm and building a trusting team, whether you're being strategic or emotional at times, and being strategic with that choice. Lots of other nuggets. Any final thoughts before we throw it to the listeners to dive in?
Yeah, you know what? Not really. I do like the way he articulated that strategic versus emotional piece, and I think it's a good, pretty good takeaway for coaches out there to understand, to maintain that strategic approach. And he talked about when he if he gets emotional, he's going to make the decision to get emotional, not let the clock decide. That he needs to be emotional. So I thought that was excellent. So.
Yeah. Last thought I'll share before we dive in is he really also brought up some good points about, just eradicating all the rookie stuff in sports, and that there's just no need for that, as well as lots of other tidbits. So make sure you like, subscribe, reach out with any questions. Obviously, you're interested in mental performance coaching, for teams, coaches, athletes, reach out, find us at cpmindset.com, and enjoy the episode as we keep going beyond the X's and O's. All right, Trev, you're back on the podcast. Welcome. had a pretty fun season this past year. Just tee us up first, just this past year. How was that journey? I know you guys went on quite the run here. So how are you doing? How was the season? A little summary to start us off.
Yeah, fired up to be back. Really excited. And it's not just because of the successful season, but when we did have one, the chance to play in an NCAA tournament for those that have experienced it. I got my first chance to do that as a coach. I did it as a player, and even more special to be able to do as a coach. Unbelievable experience. Going through, a college hockey regular season is pretty long and taxing, and the fact that we were able to, end up in the top half of the league, but then really start to play extremely well in the second half, really led us into the playoffs. Had a great run. We're able to play every round at home, which was great for the city of Buffalo. Canisius, play at the Harbor Center was amazing, and obviously capped off with a championship victory that sent us off to the NCAA tournament. And all that entails was really an unbelievable, very proud, exciting year for myself personally and Griffs everywhere. So it was great.
Oh, that's awesome. And I know we're going to dive into a few specific things, and maybe I'm not sure if there's any key lessons you learned this past year. I know you're always innovating, doing new things, and there's one big thing we know we're going to dive into. But even just this past year, I think your patience with your group and getting to work with you and know you the last few years, and your approach to the game itself, and learning and growing as a coach, your own evolution. Is there any things that stand out in terms of like your process and the things that went well this year outside of the big thing that we'll tee up next?
Yeah, you said patience, and it's maybe something that's becoming more pressing for coaches to understand. There is an evolution specifically in college athletics where, in years, there's a lot of new players that come into your team, maybe more than in the past. Some of those players have had past experiences at other colleges. So now you got to have your culture really, really dialed in. But what I learned this year is it doesn't have to all happen on day one. I think I've learned in the past, it's a mistake to skip. If you had success the year before and, you think you're going to start on, quote unquote, brick number 2 or 3, I think I learned that in the past, but this year taught me that, you don't have to have everything figured out on the first day. You do have to be patient with individuals on your team because they're going through a lot, and you're trying to have this collaboration with all players and come together so quickly. I think I learned this year that, it doesn't have to happen immediately. You may have to be patient with certain guys that will get it at certain times of the year. That was a really good process for us to go through, and we were patient with guys, and it paid off in the end heavily, as I did watch our team all really start to play well together and as individuals late in the season, definitely in the second half. So a lot of learning.
Yeah.
How did you come to understand that though, Trev? Is it like this process or an evolution in your coaching and your leadership? And is that something that you learned from your playing time, maybe back in junior or college? Is it something like how did you come to that point of being patient with players and understanding of that?
It's difficult because you're always trying to be at your best all the time. You're trying to not necessarily rush it. It's the wrong word. But you want things to go well all the time, right? I don't think anybody wants ups and downs in their season. Although I think, Chris, some of those experiences that I had as a player, and you coached me, and it's just inevitable, right? You gotta kind of realize that you're not going to have your best game every time you play. And your team's not going to have that either, right? Like I think back on coaching, and I think we've all been coaches, so we understand it. We've also all been players. Like as players, you only live your moment when your blades are on the ice, and some of those have control. You just have more control as a player to go out and make things happen. But then I learned as a coach, it's like you have 6 guys on the ice all the time, and you want it to go well for all of them, but there's a lot to manage when you're on the bench trying to get that done for everybody. I think experience has helped me. There's personal growth there, just to understand that let it go. Like you're not going to be able to control things as a coach as much as we want to.
I was gonna say that's always hard for coaches to reconcile that concept of control.
It is hard because I think some people think that that's our job, is to control, right, the players, right? And there's some of it there. You're trying to help them get there, but to be able to understand that you're going to have ups and downs. You might play great and lose. How are you going to handle that? You might play terrible and win. So we did that this year too. This evolution of bringing guys in that maybe haven't played and then just the sheer reality, some of our transfers didn't play a lot of hockey in the past couple of years, and now we're asking them to play a lot. For some guys, it takes them some time to get really going again and understand, how do I want them to play, how I want our team to play. It does take some time. I remember one story. I use the term playing pool a lot when I'm trying to have our guys understand what I'm asking them to do. And what I mean by playing pool, I've learned I need to explain this. Some guys had no idea what I was talking about. They're like trying to think swimming pool, like they're just going like, I don't know what coach is even talking about. We're talking about billiards, right? Like using angles on the wall to pass sometimes, so it's a higher percentage play. But just the sheer reality of, I had guys at the end of the year going, yeah, we had no idea what you were talking about. Right. Go through that a little bit, and now you can laugh at it. But those are the things that they hear all of your messages 30 different ways. So I do think I've learned a lot with patience and trying to have them all come together at the right time, and that the end of the year is more important than the beginning. We can work towards that. I do think it came to fruition for us this year very nicely.
Yeah. And I think it's a great message too, even just for players or athletes or anybody, just consistently learn there's a time and place to be hungry and get after it and push the pace, and a time and place to zoom out and be patient and keep perspective. And so no, it's great testament to that. Well, let's dive into the main big thing that I think is really interesting that you're doing, particularly around you and your relationship with the clock. And this definitely dives into anybody in life and athletes, and just results, the end result of coaches winning and losing in a game, or player at stats, and learning to not be obsessed about the outcomes and be immersed in your process. So I know you've got lots to share in here. I know this will be an interesting take. I know we talked about this prior. So I'm excited to dive in. I'll just tee it up to you. Why is this important? How did this come about? And then we'll unpack it a bit.
Yeah, we I think and I'll start with the beginning, and kind of in our conversations, Cass, about the clock. It's that overarching feeling when you're on a bench. I think parents understand it. I do think coaches definitely understand it. Players do too. So it's been a nice evolution for me to understand and let some of that control go, because we can all picture the 10 minutes left of the game. You may be playing a rival. It's a close game. You're up a goal, you're down a goal. And all of a sudden, for some reason, you're looking at the clock a ton. And for some reason, when you do that, the clock goes a lot slower too. Like how it feels like 2 minutes have gone by, and you look up and it's been 2 seconds, right? That it's not a good feeling, and I don't think it's optimal for performance either. So I've had some growth there. I know early in my time as a coach, I would watch those, and I'll share one story. It's a vivid memory for mine in my coaching career. It was my first game I ever coached at Canisius. I'm an assistant coach. I had just come from Army, so it's a new program. First game of the year. We're playing Western Michigan, who was a highly ranked team at that time. It was a big game, or at least we thought it was a big game. It felt like a big game. We're playing in the Sabres rink. So all of those things are there. I'm a new coach to the program. I'm excited. we're up in the game. I give that scenario, 10 minutes left in the third period. And I remember we were up, I think it was either 2-1 or 3-2, but we're up a goal. And all of a sudden I changed. I definitely changed my feeling, and it changed how I coached. What I started to do was, there's a close call for an offside, and I'm on the bench. And now I'm screaming at the linesman, it's offside, offside. I'm sure I'm looking for the whistle. I don't want Western to go in and score. So now I'm yelling at a linesman that I haven't done all game yet. Pretty calm bench we have at Canisius, and I've learned that too. Now that I think there should have been a hooking penalty. So I'm screaming at the line, that's a hook. And all of a sudden, Dave Smith, a great mentor of mine, he's the head coach at the time. He walks down the bench and he kind of tugs on my arm and goes, "Hey, we don't do that. We don't do that here." Goes back down the bench. And I remember the first time I'm like, I'm not really sure what he's talking about. A couple minutes go by and there's probably another offside call, and I'm still going. And he comes back down. He's like, "Hey, Trevor, look at our bench. Look at the guys. They're not screaming and yelling. They're an older group. They're a confident group. They're just going over the boards and doing their job. They're going over the boards and doing their job." So that was a, life-changing moment for me as a coach to understand I got to let that feeling go, because I don't coach as well. Like, that wasn't me in my best coaching. I wasn't concentrating the guys. I was trying to control the result, right? I think we've talked about those things many times. So that's where it really started for me to understand that, what is the best version of me coaching those moments when emotions are starting to come in. The game's really important. It's a close game. We want to win. Our intent is to win, but you got to understand that there's a wrong way to do it. And I think there's a much better way to do it. And that was a big moment for me.
Yeah, I think that's a good tee up to then the evolutions you've had since then. And then I don't know if it's this exact past season where you really started to stop looking at the clock, really start to detach. Is that what happened this past year? And I think it doesn't mean we don't care about results. Like you said, the goal and the intent is the result, but learning as an athlete, a high performer, a coach, to let go of that and immerse, like, what is your process? And I liked how you just said there, is like, what's my best self as a coach? And I even remember that when I was coaching just minor hockey, it's like, how am I showing up? It's like, we're so consumed with how the players show up and what their job is and making sure they do their job and they show up well, but reflecting on ourselves and our own roles, I think is quite powerful. So maybe just now, is it this past year where it really kind of shaped, where it kind of jumped into another level where you just really stopped looking at the clock, especially in those tighter moments? Maybe unpack that a little further now.
Sure. It definitely, I'd say I performed the best this past season. I've done it in previous years, but maybe not to the level where it, is kind of front of my mind, to make sure that I really try to avoid coaching like that, because what I've seen is it's not as effective. It doesn't work as well. And some coaches may think this is outrageous, but really it's not. It was very effective and it did work. So the clock thing in all of those moments, and sometimes I do catch myself doing it, and it's a little bit of that trigger for me that I'm like, oh, hey, remember now, don't look at it again, in the next 15 seconds, because you may go down that path that you've done in the past and it's not going to work as well. It doesn't mean we won every game or lost every game. I know I coached better in some of the moments. So if I caught myself doing that, where you look at the clock and you're like, it's 10:05 left, we need this game. Like, this is a really important one. I did find a much better shift to go, okay, just focus on the team, coach them. I think there's a split between being strategic and being emotional. I think some coaches err if they are emotional too often, where it's constant, right? Emotion. Players can't really read that very well. People take that different ways if you're emotional all the time. So that's part of the clear separator for me, is that I try to make sure that I'm always strategic. And if I decide to go emotional, then I made the decision to do that. And that's going to be for a very specific reason. So in that element, when I say I stop looking at the clock, I do share a little bit of it. It doesn't mean that strategy goes out the door. It doesn't mean that I'm not aware if there's 25 seconds left and who are we putting on the ice. Those are the moments where I can look at the clock and be strategic and know that, all right, we have this much time left. Here are the things that are the most important. Are we calling a timeout? Are we not? Do we need to pull the goalie? Are they going to pull the goalie? Like, you still stay very strategic. But I've had this happen in games. I keep coaching when the game was over. What I mean by that is puck goes into the neutral zone. I'm trying to still make sure our guys are getting into position or who's coming next. I might say, hey, Chris, you're up next. Right? And then the buzzer, I mean, like, why would you tell? Like, but that, it came to fruition for me that is me coaching without worrying if we're going to win the game. That is me pouring everything I can into my team to make sure that, the intent is to win. But I've let the clock go. I've let that score go away. I'm just going to make sure I'm giving guys everything that I can to make sure that I'm coaching my best version. And that has literally happened before. I keep coaching as the puck has gone down the ice and I hear the buzzer go and I'm like, oh, okay, we won. Let's go shake hands with the coaches and line up and get on to the next, target, so to speak. It has taken time and it does take commitment, but it has been very beneficial for me in my coaching philosophy.
I just love that. I'll let you jump in, Chris. And then I got to say something about that because there's a couple good nuggets.
I want to drill in on the strategic and emotional, because I think that's such a key piece. And, there, famous video with Kobe Bryant, he talks about the idea of being tactical versus emotional, so same term. And so, how he deals with mistakes and whatnot. So for you, what, in terms of that, like, I like that concept of being strategic, and then if you decide to get emotional, you'll go there. For the coaches who are listening, and specifically a lot of minor hockey coaches, there's this feeling and this the sense that they need to be emotional all the time, because that's the way to motivate, that's the way to drive kids, that's the way to drive winning, and that's the way, what the parents want. What can you say to that? Like, how can you articulate to that difference between being strategic and emotional for those coaches? Because there's a lot who listen to the podcast, and I'm wondering, these concepts that we're talking about are almost, we understand them, and we're espousing them and we're teaching them, but it's and with the coaches we work with. But for you that that have kind of, you've gone through the whole process, how can you convey to those coaches that maybe deciding to be emotional versus thinking that they need to be emotional because that's what they're supposed to do?
Right.
Yeah. And this isn't even just coaches. This is the players being leaders too, or anybody in a leadership position. So yeah, that's a great question, Chris. Go ahead.
Yeah. We have, and I think everybody kind of mirrors the highest level. And I think sometimes it's a little bit lost. I think sometimes it's right and sometimes it's not. You have to, understand the age you're coaching, what the players are like. You got to understand your team. You got to have a pulse on your team. Some teams need more energy from the coach and respond to that. But are you paying attention to the response? Some teams need less energy from the coach because it's a pretty energetic group. So you have to know your team. I think you see it on TV. If you watch most NHL coaches, they look very calm. Some of them make, TSN or ESPN if they had their moment of being too emotional, and that's what you see on, broken down by whatever, a broadcast or something. Oh, this guy he lost his mind, right? But for the most part, if you watch NHL coaches, they are very calm. One, because they know they got Sidney Crosby on the bench and he's, got a process, and he probably doesn't need a lot of, motivation to shift by shift. So I think that does filter down at a certain level. And I do think a calm bench usually sets themselves up to win, because there's a lot of trust there, and there's probably coaching that's happened in other moments, and there's confidence to let your team go out and play. I think that can be a huge benefit. What I remember growing up, and I did start coaching like this because this is what I saw, was coaches controlling where the puck goes. Because I think there's energy and there's strategy and in doing things different ways. Like if you're the coach that's going chip it, move it, pass, like it's too much. The players can't hear you. Mom and dad are the same thing. They can't hear them either. They can't take that information in and then process the game of hockey. It's too fast. It's too much there. So I think letting that control go away is I would recommend that for a lot of coaches. But you can have energy and coach your team on the bench while those things are happening. You can tell player, hey, that was really good play on that. Let's try to keep doing that again. Let go what's happening live. They're trying to figure it out. You're trying to coach them on what to see and what to think, but they're going to make mistakes and they're going to make great plays. But trying to control where the puck goes at all times, I think it's too hard. They can't do exactly what you want to do in all those moments. So, I would recommend putting your energy into the guys that are actually on the bench and what they're going to see coming up, not the play live. It's impossible to coach that way. And I did it. I watched it. I had coached that, chip it, move it, pass. It's a lot.
No. Cass, I'm just going to one more. I'm going to push on this, and I love that, Trevor, because it's. I mean, certainly. I mean, I'm guilty as well. As a young coach, and having done that, and then you learn and you kind of grow as you go. As you get the experience. You said the word control probably about 7 or 8 times there, and that to me is the biggest piece in I think conveying is young coaches want to control everything because they think it's a reflection of them.
No doubt.
You also said a calm bench is an element of trust. And I love that because any relationship, trust is the bedrock. And coach-player relationship, trust is the bedrock. So if you trust yourself as a coach and the work you've done, then having a calm bench should be the outlay of that, right? And so that to me is what my takeaway in terms of that, and from what you just said, in addition to pouring that out to coaches who are listening, and to say maybe ceding control is an act of trust in your players, but trust in the work that you've done as a coach and your coaching staff. Is that right? Is that an accurate assessment?
It is for sure accurate, and there is some there is some things that you think about, because how are you being evaluated, right? You're starting to worry about what other people are seeing you do as a coach. That can twist you a little bit too, right? Like I have administration that are at the games and watching me play. I'm not thinking about them evaluating me as I'm coaching. That doesn't work. We have parents come to games. It's a little bit different because their kids are older. But I think a lot of youth hockey parents are being evaluated by parents, and they're concerned. Some parents might think you're doing a great job. Some parents might think you're not. Like, how are you going to handle that? It's just inevitable. Doing the style that I'm currently doing, there may be people that watch me coach and go, he's not doing anything. And that couldn't be further from the truth. But that misstep of, well, just seeing me, run around and go up and down the bench, watch us lose a lot of games, right? It's that there isn't trust there. Coaching live is really hard. That can't be the only time that you're coaching your team. What have you done before? I talk to our guys all the time, like, players get to play. Like, now it's your time to showcase all the stuff that we've learned and we've been working on. But sometimes it's really hard because there's an opponent too, who's well prepared and good. And sometimes the plan doesn't go as the way I said it, But I do think about it all the time. Like if you think about like if the system is why we win, if I'm the greatest coach on the planet and I'm telling the team that I am, and I'm why we win because we're going to play this system exactly detailed. What happens when we win? Well, I'm taking all the credit, and good coaches do the opposite. You get like the players get to play. They're the reason why we win or lose. They're the ones that are in the game. Because the other thing happens if you don't win, they don't take any of the ownership of it. They're just saying, well, you said we were going to win because we played this way and we didn't. So it's your fault. That doesn't work, right? It doesn't create the environment on a bench that a good hockey team portrays, or like that doesn't help the culture. It doesn't help win hockey games. It's the players get to play. They're why we win. We got a great system. We got great coaches. We got great staff. We got great support, but I don't get to play anymore.
Yeah.
I think
I
the
love
last
that.
really good hockey player, Chris, you coached me. That was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago. You're right.
And then we'll get into who was a better player for Chris after, but I'm
Oh, here
not sure.
we go.
That'll be a good,
You know
ending.
what? You guys could have been on a line because Trev was a right winger,
Oh,
and you're a
Yeah.
left winger, Cass. You just needed somebody in the middle to distribute the puck to either one of you guys because you both can score. So
Oh, well, there we go.
how's that?
No. So what I want to dive into, or what I think is really cool, an interesting way to reflect on what you're doing and the way we're looking at coaching, leadership, and getting anybody to look at not obsessing about the results and being in the moment, is I'll bring a golf example, because I do this with every athlete, but it's particularly in golf. When a good golfer, and even an average golfer, golfs really well, they'll often lose track of the score. And that's often hard for a good golfer because they're like, I'm 3 under. Like it's pretty easy, like par, like pretty easy to keep track of the score. And but that's that moment. It's like the end of the round. They're not even know what they're shooting. They're just so focused on the next shot in the game. And that's why they're shooting so well often. Obviously, you can perform well without losing touch of the score and whatever. But the more you're immersed is actually a good cue. And it was funny, one of the pro golfers I'm working with, I was going over this with him recently, and he's like, oh yeah, a couple times like in my career. And I'm like, okay, well, like no worries, like if it happens again, like, that's like actually a good thing. And this past weekend performed really well, like big results on the line. And he's like, yeah, 2 out of the 3 rounds he had no idea what he was shooting by the end of it, and like he shot really well, so that was part of it. And he was so immersed in his process. And so I don't know if that, one, I think it's a good resonant and just another way to look at what we're doing here. But even just not even just the clock, but the score of the game. It's not just the time. It's like you're almost not even sure, like, are you guys up 2 or 3 or 1, or like you're probably somewhat aware of that to a degree. But I wonder how much that applies as well, and how much that resonates for you.
I think there's a good correlation there, because it's not like I don't know what's happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of awareness. I know exactly what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Golf analogy, which I do golf casts, and I agree, and I think most people can understand that. If I let the score go, if somebody else is keeping score, and I ask at the end, I go, wow, I played really well. And then if you're going, oh, I'm not doing well early, then you get tight, you don't play well, it goes worse.
Mm-hmm.
Or someone is, hey, I'm playing really well, don't screw it up.
Yeah.
Like, does it really, like, I'm 43 years old, I've never played golf competitively. Why would it matter what score I have at the end of a golf round? Yeah. So like, what does it do for me? I don't play golf for money. Mm-hmm. Just so I can tell my buddies I played well. Right. It's like, but those feelings are still real, because I want a good score. I want to be able to play. So I think it's a good analogy, because in golf, the lingering effect lasts longer. I think in hockey, it's a sport where we can very quickly make up for a mistake. We can, right? If you turn the puck over, you can go get it back. If you get scored on, we'll just go out and score, like make up for it. You have a very quick opportunity. Golf, you have to walk very slowly to that ball that you just put in the woods. It doesn't feel like you're going to do well for the rest of the day, right? Like I think both can help you. But hockey creates an environment where if you can master these things or try to master them or come close, I think that's where the performance can go off the charts, because you're looking very quickly, very positively about what can happen next. And that's a bit of what I'm doing, right? It's if I can let I know the score, I know what's happening, I know how much time's left, but if I can let go of that and just pump everything in, if the other team scores, we're fine. And I'm immediately going to respond with, we're fine, line up and let's play. Can't wait. You guys are going to go knock the doors down. We're right on them. Right. Like, it allows you to very quickly respond. Like I just said it earlier. That's what it allows you to do. You don't have to go, oh no, we just got scored on. It's now a tie game. There's only 4 minutes left. What does my AD think about what we just happened? Or is it like, are the guys okay? Are we okay here? It's instant. All those things are gone, and it's about, what are we going to do now? Yeah. So I think this allow, coaches and athletes, and that's what we want, respond quickly. And hockey provides that environment. You just have to work on it. So when it happens, you're not trying to figure it out, right? That's the prep of it all.
Yeah. And that's coping planning 101, or planning to cope with stress, distraction, adversity. When this happens, how do we respond? And as how do I respond as a coach, let alone as a team? How are we responding as individuals dealing with it? And so, you've got that dialed in. And what I want to dive a little even deeper on, and share as much as you want here. I know you've done some of the alter ego work that, we do with a player, and athletes, high performers in any area, about clarifying, how do you want to show up? Who do you want to be on the field of play? And that's what, the essence of what we've been talking about anyways, is getting, this is what I'm going to do. And I'm not going to be consumed with the score and the clock and coach the clock. I want to be an effective coach and connect to the players on the bench, and tactical and strategic versus emotional. How much can you maybe allude to, just maybe unpacking a bit who you want to be, and what is exactly your process? What does it mean to you to be coaching those players, or the identity and narrative work that I know you've done a bit of as well? Anything you can share there, I think, would be very interesting.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to share it. It does become individual, because I do believe that depending on, your internal thoughts and how you view yourself, and your personality and what your values are and the most important things for you, you start to have an awareness of, okay, if it's not going well and I am overreacting or underreacting to being emotional, what does that do for me as a coach? Right. I just shared the example of the Western Michigan one. Obviously, it got my emotions up, and I started to basically say out loud to my team that I don't think you're good enough to win. So I'm going to try to do something to force the referees to have us win. And that's what I've learned. That's what a lot of players would hear. That's not the coach that I want to show up as. That's not who I am. It's not my values. But I've also learned that sometimes I get very quiet. If things aren't going the way, I don't feel good. I get small, I get quiet. I don't want to be that either. That's not a good version of me as a coach. Guys don't respond to that properly. They want to know that you're with them, and you need to be able to act properly. So that's obviously taken some experience and some time. My natural state is not ultra competitive, want to knock the doors down every moment of the day. That's not who I am as a person. I want to make sure my team's okay, that we're cooperating, we're together, and we're going to get through it all together. I don't want to overpower as a coach. So you learn all these things about how you can show up. And for me, I visit that ultra competitive world for practices and games. I've learned to do that. I don't think the guys would say I'm a lot different, but I hope they would say, yeah, we know that Trevor, he's in it's go time, right? I think head coaches need to have that in them. So I visit that world very easily, and I live there in games for sure. And at the same time, I'm not trying to be something I'm not, and it's not like I have to give up all the strategy just to be like, trying to beat the door down. There's the character that you create, I do think is important. Mine has definitely helped me show up as, this is what I want the players to see me when it's time to coach a game. And in practice, they know that I'm with them and I'm doing a couple things. I don't have to overshare with them what I'm doing, but they feel that, hey, I'm with them. I'm going to be really strategic. You should feel my passion. You should feel my energy, and I'm doing this for you guys. It is important. It does take time. There's a lot of effort in creating that alter ego, as I know you guys work with a lot. And I do think it is very helpful. And it's not just as a player, as a coach, you do want to show up as the version that you want.
Yeah.
Right.
And I'll just jump in and maybe I'll throw it to Chris here. Just the impact of, and I'm sure Chris, you could speak to this. I talk to a lot of coaches and work with a lot of coaches, or coaches bring me in to talk to their team. And they're always like, how can you help my athletes? And like, what can you teach them about their mindset? And not very many go, how can I apply this to me? How can I become better? And in particular, as a leader, as a coach, let alone any athlete and anybody, but just the benefits of having the clarity in your mind about, how do I want to show up and how do I not want to show up? And therefore the impact and the evolution. It's not like you've got it perfect and it'll never evolve. It's constantly evolving as the context and the landscape changes, as you change and evolve over time. It's not something you're done now working on, but you've even just articulated quite well throughout this podcast, the evolution of your own learning as a coach, and what works for you and doesn't work for you, and what connects and works with your players. So I don't know if you want to speak to that, Chris, because I know it's just important for leaders to often self-reflect on their own role, and the identity work, I think, is a good foundational thing here.
The one thing, I appreciate that. And it's great that, like you say, the stuff that you do, Cass, and, I'm certainly, obviously, I work alongside and work with you in terms of, working with coaches and athletes. I know from my sense of my growth and, experience as a coach, it was basically, if I didn't do it, I shudder at the thought of like who I would have become as a coach. I had to be very intentional about that, but it's almost because I believe that to be the right thing to do. There's not a lot of coaches that feel that way. And obviously Trevor's, kind of gone through his growth process too. So I think there's a lot of resources out there and opportunity for coaches to delve into, the concepts of how they show up and what their personal leadership is. And I think that's so important. And just in light of, a lot of the transgressions that seem to be going on in different areas, at the NCAA level with the football, Northwestern football, and, Harvard women's hockey, and these things that are happening, that's a leadership piece for me, because I just think that's where coaches, might have given up a little bit of their leadership along the way. But, in terms of being able to impact the culture, and Trev, you said it earlier, every year, it's not stepping into brick 2 or brick 3 of leadership. It's being able to revisit it based on what the expectations are for your culture at Canisius. I think that's awesome. So I think from a standpoint of what I believe to be true is that, that repetition of what is important is key. But then same thing as you're showing, as you say, in terms of your alter ego, how do you want to show up? That has to be, you have to repeat that along the way too, and revisit it from a self-reflection piece. So that's kind of where my piece. I'm a big self-reflection guy and always have been. Even, I'll take journaling and those kinds of things, and that's how I think I evolved as a coach over time, and we kind of off air, we were talking about, when I coached you, it was my first ever head coaching job at the junior level. And I made a lot of mistakes, and you reminded me of them. And that's great. That's great that we had this relationship where we could. But the point being is, as a result of that, I was able to self-reflect and learn. So by the time I coached Cass, we were building championship cultures and stuff, 6, 7 years after that. But it's a lot of self-reflection. And so that again, it's a long-winded way of just talking about that concept and the idea of how you want to show up. And I've articulated on this podcast, when I went to the OHL and coached in the Ontario Hockey League, by the time I was, I got fired in 2012, I didn't like who I was becoming. I kind of devolved from who I was before. So I gave into the pressures of winning, the pressures of what the fans are saying, what the ownership, like those kinds of things. So it's an interesting kind of concept of things.
It's not easy, right? Like, and you're welcome, Kat. I got Chris ready for you. He was dialed in. So we have expectations that our players are going to improve, right? You should be improving. There's skill development. There's, the mental side of the game that we're all trying to get better at, because it does help performance. It helps you later in life, but it also helps you in the current day of what you're trying to do. So I always think, and I agree heavily with you, Chris, it's like, if that's what I believe in, I'm doing the same thing. It's very easy to talk about that. Of course, I want to know, hey, what are you working on and what works? And I got 30 players on the team. They're not all the same. There isn't one formula that you give to a player and all of a sudden it unlocks. It's not. They're individuals. You touched on, some of the things that are happening in college athletics, and for anybody that's listening, I think we need to pay attention. The stuff that we're doing in the locker room and saying in the locker room needs to change in our game for sure. I would tell everybody out there, this idea of what rookies do, gone, all of it. None of it is good. Nothing helps a culture. And those are some of the things that have happened. And I think we're years ahead of people. There shouldn't be anything. There shouldn't be picking up pucks, putting on nets, packing the bus, eating last. All those things are absolutely ridiculous. It's taken major things to happen to individuals and people and coaches that get into the media. And I hope people are listening attentively. All that stuff needs to go. There should be nothing exist that isn't about making your culture better and helping individuals. And everybody understands it when you're outside of it, right? To be like, why would you make somebody do something like that? Does that make them feel good? If the answer is no, then what are you doing it? Because you had to do it 4 years ago? It's ridiculous. So for every junior coach, team, player, 12-year-old, coach in the NHL, all that stuff, in my opinion, should be gone and not even remotely close.
So it's interesting you talk about that. Last week, Patrice Bergeron just retired, 19 years with the Bruins, and everybody talks about him being the ultimate professional. Is kind of how he gets described, for first ballot Hall of Famer. And they talked about his idea of that, in terms of leadership in the Bruins culture. And it was like exactly that. There's no picking up of pucks. There's no, he was embracing the rookies. You're part of this team now. You're part of what, our group, and kind of that's kind of from a leadership perspective. That comes organizationally, in my mind, down to him. And personally, obviously, he has a personal, affinity for embracing his athletes in that manner. But I thought that was really cool to hear those stories, very similar to what you're talking about, in terms of what seems to be common practice in hockey with respect to rookies.
I do think it's getting better, and I do hope it's getting better. There's podcasts like this. There's people that are trying to get the message out. Like Leaders Eat Last is a great book. That's all you need to know. Like that, you can read the book. It's great, but that's what you need to know. That's what leaders do, right? If there's a small piece of chicken, that's my piece of chicken. Like, why? I don't need more food than our best player. Doesn't that make sense? Right. Myself and our captain last year was JD Polk, who's a 2-year captain. Him and I would fight basically verbally, like every meal, going, no, you go, coach. Going, right. That's got to put these things into play, and they're not difficult if that's what you really believe. I think for some people trying to do it, without the confidence to do it, or, without conviction, then it's not going to work. And it like in college hockey, we have, first year players and seniors, right? The story I tell that's easy is all right, so Cash, you're younger than me. If I'm a senior and you come in as a freshman and the environment's just average and you tiptoe in your freshman year, you get a couple points, you're a pretty good player, but we don't have the success that maybe we could have if you were great, right? So all of a sudden, my last year of college hockey, maybe we didn't get as far as we could, and it happens to lots of people. And then your sophomore year, you're an absolute rock star. You tear it up. You have a bazillion points. You're an all-conference player. You take off. That's a little bit on me. I would literally be going like, where were you when I needed you? I needed you to be great when you were a freshman, when you're a first year player. What happened? And the environment does that. There's a little bit of opportunity there, but that I got to look at myself on that. If that happened too, going, what did I do or what did we do as a team to not have you be as great as you could be earlier in your career? I think everybody thinks it's like, oh, I just got to, get comfortable. Well, get comfortable now. That's the job of the environment, is to have the best version of you as soon as possible. Because as a coach, I don't want to wait for my players to be great as juniors and seniors. I want them to be great for as long as I get you. And the team has to create that environment too. So there isn't jealousy of a younger guy that gets to play more than an older guy. Like, how do you handle that? Those are real challenges for teammates and coaches, and a really good environment can handle it.
Love it.
Yeah, I think we could probably go another hour or so. I do want to be mindful of your time. We're trying to keep it tight. We're probably going to get you to come back on, every month. But
what are we doing?
Weekly, weekly BXLs with Trev is a new segment, but
We'll do it on the golf course.
yeah. So, but what I think a couple things to maybe wrap up, final thoughts, other advice, just around mindset, mental game, leadership. I know even maybe if you want to touch on like the burden of leadership and the burden of caring, I think is a common thing it's getting talked about more, but I think you're a great example of that, where you really do care about your players. And at the same time, you have to manage and deal with that. So, I don't want to go too much longer and be mindful of your time, but any final thoughts or you want to dive into that just a little bit before we wrap up here?
Yeah, a couple, quick hitters that have helped me. Leadership is lonely. So just understanding that and be okay with it. Everybody's heard Kobe talk about it. Like, these are concepts, but it is very true. And it's okay. Like, just realize that and know that when I wake up in the morning as head coach, I do feel that I am the driving force for the program. So there's an empowering emotion there. There is pressure there, but I do believe that people respond to pressure. It's a good thing. But it is lonely at times, because you're trying to make the decision to go a certain way, and you may be right or wrong. But for me, as long as I know that I've been strategic with those decisions, then I'm okay. If I'm just randomly trying to do things, that doesn't work. Nobody thinks about you as much as sometimes you think they are. That's a very freeing feeling to let go. When there are wins and losses and you are evaluated, when you are trying to advance in your profession, it may be where you are, it may be the next level, it may be where you're going. Just know that that's always true, but people aren't thinking of you as much as you think they might be. So that internal narrative is really important. And some of these things that we're talking about, Cass and Chris, have helped me to don't worry about those things. Show up as the best version of Trevor Large that I want the guys on the team to know that I am there for them. I am strategic in what we're doing. I am trying to improve on myself and help them reach their full potential. Those things are way more important than the stuff that is completely out of my control. I really try to focus on those things, and I hope that a little bit of the tidbits from me today help coaches out there. I do think it's a great part of my job that I get to share some of these things, because there's not a lot of sharing. It's getting better, but there's not a lot of sharing in our industry. I wish it was, full of those things, but these are things that have helped me along the way. If they help players, coaches, all of the above, parents, just to try to understand, if you haven't coached, what it's like on the bench. Hopefully that insight does help, because that's what I'm trying to do, and just trying to share what I've learned along the way. Not done yet.
Yeah. Love it, Trev. Love it. Do you want people to reach out on Twitter? I think you're active on there a little bit. Anything, final tidbits? Follow the Griffs online, all that good stuff. Final thoughts?
Everything's at Griffs Hockey. I am at Twitter's at coach_large. Feel free. Instagram and Twitter is a great way to interact. There's lots of good stuff on there. I see stuff that you guys do that I like, favorite, and there's lots of good messages that are out there. I hope that people can pay attention to the positive things that happen on social media, because it's typically not as positive as it should be. So I tend to put out the things that resonate with me, and if they resonate with you, great. But obviously I heavily appreciate being on the podcast. I love getting on here with you guys. So, Chris, we could talk about the old Caps days and lots of good that I remember, but at the same time, I think it's not just the three of us. There's a lot of people out there that are trying to improve this wonderful world of athletics. It's obviously a love of mine. Hockey's been a part of my life for as long as I can remember. But when you're leading people, it's a lot different than hockey. It's hockey's one thing. It's a small part of my job, believe it or not. Trying to lead people and develop leadership skills and young men is ultra important to me. I hope they get a lot out of our time, and anytime I can get in front of people, and hopefully people listening do reach out. If you have questions, I'd be happy to help as much as I could.
Awesome.
No drill. I want to talk about drills.
No drills.
Beyond the X's and O's, right, Trev? Beyond the X's and O's.
No forecheck, neutral zone, none of those things. The more important things.
There you go. The more important thing. I'm glad you said that. That's awesome.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Trev.
You guys be good.